Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny. I'm here today to give you my 2022 reading review wrap-up. Just go through some of the stats of what I read this year. Overall, I felt like I had a really positive reading year. I made my goal of 75 books right near the end of December, which is what I was expecting. And I read about 6 books on average a month, which felt really good to me. Out of those books that I read, 40 were fiction and around 24 were nonfiction. I know that doesn't add up to 75, but the way that I record the books in my my notebook and the way that they're recorded on Goodreads don't necessarily correlate that well. So I read 6 books of poetry. I had 2 DNFs, which is pretty good, I think. I probably would have DNF'd a few other books, but I was reading for the BookTube prize in the translated fiction category, and so when you're reading for the BookTube prize, you're asked not to DNF. So some of them I read finished because I had to finish them, not because I actually wanted to finish them. Out of the books that I read, 16 of those were audiobooks. So overall, that was about 19,484 pages, and my average rating was about 3.8 stars, and I had 16 5-star reads. So I thought that was really positive. I think that's a really good number for 5 stars. I tend like 3.8 rating. I give a lot of books 4 stars, and then a lot of the ones that were not of my own choosing necessarily, so that I was reading for the BookTube prize, got 3 stars in the end, with a few even lower than that. So overall, I felt really positive about my reading year. I think that I'm continuing to kind of whittle down some areas, such as my personal library at home that I have. So I haven't really kept a tally of those books very closely, especially the last few years when I've been adding more. I certainly bought more books in 2020 around COVID, but I also find now that I'm looking into specific types of things for the research that I'm doing with my reading, and so in those cases the library may not always have the books that I'm looking for, and so I'm searching out those books and purchasing them and bringing them into my collection that way. And I also was able to keep the library list that I have, which is a virtual list on their website, to a fairly reasonable amount of about, just under 500, which seems like too many. But I will say there's also some DVDs on there, and there's also some art books or instructional type books that are not, lengthy novels that I'm going to be reading. I think what I would like to do for the second part of this video is to talk a little bit about my favorite reads. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and think some more on that, and then I'll check in again with you about that portion. All right, so I decided to break down my top reads this year into categories to make it easier for everybody. And I picked Carrie, a memoir of survival on stolen land by Toni Jensen, as my top nonfiction read. I think I said it in my review of this, which I will link down below, that it was a book that I considered to be almost perfect. It presented Toni Jensen presented her ideas in this really fantastic way, connecting like words with ideas and like the meaning behind the words, and working out her feelings around different topics that way. And as a Métis woman, sharing her experience growing up in the United States and around gun laws, and the way she was able to present both sides of the gun argument in this really concise and poetic and beautiful way, I thought was just exceptional. So Carrie won out for my top nonfiction read of 2022. For my fiction read, I picked Self-Portrait with Boy by Rachel Lyon. I just thought the execution of this novel was also practically perfect. It just had this very, very compelling moral dilemma at its heart, and the characters were drawn around that, and you felt connected to them, but you were also very involved in this overall dilemma that the main character Lou is going through. And I just feel like it really hit all the marks for me. I did do a full review on this book, which I will link down below. For historical fiction, I ended up having a tie because I loved both of these novels so much. The Summer Before the War by Helen Simonson and The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. It's interesting to me, these are both set very closely together in the same decade, actually. So there is a sweet spot for me in terms of World War I fiction. I really love books set in this time period. I don't know why. It's just a time period that I find fascinating, and thus far the books I've read have been, a lot of them, incredible, and these two are no exception to that. So The Summer Before the War starts, obviously the summer before World War I begins, and then goes through the war, and I believe ends near the war itself ending. So it does go into World War I, but it doesn't really give you a front line perspective so much, a little bit, but not as much as the kind of back home perspective. And then The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue is during the pandemic post World War I. And so that's where that comes from. And then my next book is my top poetry book of 2022, and that was House Made of Rain by Pamela Porter. This is, Pamela Porter is a British Columbia poet. I really love nature poetry. I would say that's my sweet spot for poetry. But these poems also were very interesting and introspective about relationships, and specifically her relationship with her father. And so you get a lot of that tying together as you're listening to this, or as you're reading this poetry collection. And I actually picked one of the poems in this book for my poetry project, my art project. So I will be sharing which one that is with you in a video coming up later in 2023. My top translated fiction read was More Than I Love My Life by David Grossman. This is a fantastic book that jumps from present day to the past. We're talking about World War II. We're talking about work camps that were set up, and a mother-daughter relationship. Those are kind of the tie-ins. So the kind of generational trauma that carries through a war experience in a family, and what a family will do to try to stay connected, but also the kind of choices that one makes in these difficult situations, and how those choices have reverberations going forward that you can never truly anticipate. So it's just got so many layers. And then I finished off my top audiobook listen of 2023 was Dear Senthuran, a Black Spirit memoir by Akwaeke Emezi. And I really, really loved listening to this memoir. Emezi narrates it themselves, and it was done in a kind of epistolary style. So each chapter is a letter written to a certain person. And I just, listening to their voice and their cadence when they were telling these stories just brought it alive in a way that I don't think another narrator could have possibly done. So I think if you like their work, I would definitely recommend listening to this book, although I have to say that I'm also going to be ordering this to have in hard copy, because a lot of the experiences shared and the wisdom shared is something that I would like to be able to read and hold in my hand as well to keep forever. And so those are my top reads of 2022. So that's everything I wanted to share with you about my 2022 reading. I will be checking in again with another video about my 2023 goals, and I have several different TBR videos that I am going to be filming over the next few weeks, talking about the books that I'm planning to focus on for 2023. Thank you so much for watching.